When we start to experience troublesome levels of anxiety, most of us just want to get better. We believe something has happened to our mind, that anxiety has taken over, and that we need to repair whatever has gone wrong. But the funny thing is, those that have successfully reached the other side of anxiety usually find that by the time they get there, they understand something very differently. They didn't need to heal from anxiety, they needed to discover that they were never ill in the first place. Hi, I'm Tim Box, mind coach and anxiety therapist, and for the last 15 years, I've been working one-to-one with clients both in person and online to help them get the other side of their anxiety issues and to help them start enjoying life again without anxiety getting in the way. When people first come to see me, they'll often talk about wanting to recover. They want to heal their anxiety, regulate their nervous system, manage their symptoms, and get back to the person they were before all this began. And look, I completely understand why they see it that way. When you've been experiencing frightening physical sensations, intrusive thoughts, panic episodes, or a constant sense of unease, it can genuinely feel as though something has broken. It feels like you were once well, then anxiety arrived, and now you need to find your way back to health somehow. The implied belief is something has gone wrong with me. From there, the whole journey becomes about getting better. But I don't think that's what anxiety recovery really is. I don't think it's a journey from illness to health. I think it's a journey from misunderstanding to understanding. You weren't broken and then repaired. You were frightened and then you understood. One of the strangest things about anxiety is that we treat it completely differently from every other emotion. It won't surprise you to hear that nobody comes to see me asking for strategies to manage their happiness. We don't worry that joy might suddenly become overwhelming and take over our lives. And we don't open birthday presents and report that they triggered our gratitude. We simply understand that something happened, we felt an emotional response, and eventually that emotion passed. We don't worry that the fear we experience watching a horror movie might get stuck there forever. We don't create a recovery plan because we've just become too excited about our upcoming holiday. We just experience the emotion. But with anxiety, we've created an entirely different vocabulary. We talk about triggers, symptoms, and coping mechanisms. We've taken one natural human emotion and set it apart as something that requires specialist handling. And the more specially we treat anxiety, the more serious and unusual it begins to seem. Now, I know the obvious objection. Anxiety doesn't feel like happiness. And of course it doesn't. Anxiety can feel deeply unpleasant. It can be intensely physical, frightening, and disruptive. But intensity doesn't change its category. A huge amount of happiness is still happiness. Intense grief is still grief. And overwhelming anger is still anger. The intense anxiety is still anxiety. We've confused "this feels awful" with "this must mean something is medically wrong." Those are not the same thing. An emotion can be uncomfortable without being unhealthy, and it can be powerful without being dangerous. It can even affect your whole experience for a period of time without becoming an illness you've now contracted. Imagine someone is grieving after losing a person they love. They might struggle to sleep. They may lose their appetite. They may find it difficult to concentrate or feel motivated. They might even experience actual physical pain. Grief can affect thoughts, behavior, and the body in profound ways. But we don't usually assert that the grief itself is a disease. We understand that a healthy human being is experiencing a powerful emotional response to something deeply important. We don't necessarily like it, and we certainly wouldn't choose it, but we understand why it's there. I think anxiety belongs in that same category. It's an emotional response produced by a healthy human system. The difficulty comes when we become frightened of what that response means. So here's the problem. Once anxiety has been set apart as a condition, it becomes something you feel you have to manage at all costs. You start checking how anxious you are when you wake up. You scan your body for sensations. You identify places or situations as potential triggers, and you keep calming techniques nearby in case anxiety appears. And perhaps most importantly, you start to judge the trajectory of your condition according to whether you feel better or worse than the day before. And again, all of this is completely understandable if you believe anxiety is evidence that something's gone wrong. But every attempt to manage anxiety as a condition quietly reinforces the belief that anxiety is dangerous enough to require management. You don't monitor a feeling unless you believe the feeling itself indicates a problem. And when anxiety becomes the problem, you naturally become anxious about feeling anxious. This is called second fear. The initial bout of high anxiety may have been about something happening in life. The second fear is created when you decide that the emotional response itself is dangerous, unhealthy, or evidence that you're no longer well. And that second fear is usually what keeps the whole experience going. Imagine you woke up one morning feeling unexpectedly happy. You probably wouldn't immediately ask, "Why am I happy?" You'd simply get on with your day. And because you weren't constantly watching the emotion, it would eventually shift naturally as life continued. That's what emotions do. Life happens, we react to it, life continues. Anxiety is no different in that respect, but because we've been taught to see it as a symptom of a condition, we often refuse to allow it that same natural movement. We hold it under observation, continually asking what it means. We repeatedly check whether it's gone, and in doing so, we keep reminding ourselves that anxiety is important enough to watch. But those that have got the other side, well, they see it a little differently. Before we go any further, have you checked out the members area of this channel? In there, you'll find hours and hours of extra anxiety and mind coaching content, including my full control system training and the Clear Your Head Anxiety Relief Program. You'll also get full access to exclusive weekly live Q&As. It's just £9 for a full month's access, and you can join by hitting the button on the homepage or clicking the link in the description of this video. See you there. You'll often hear people like Tony Robbins talking about finding success by modeling the habits of successful people. So let's learn from those that have successfully got the other side of their anxiety issues and see how we might model their approach. Now, the first thing to say here is that if you ask anyone who's the other side of all this how they got there, they will most likely describe starting out in a very similar fashion to everyone else. At the beginning, they desperately wanted to find the right strategy to get rid of their anxiety. They searched for the perfect breathing technique, grounding exercise, nutritional supplement, or anxiety management routine that would finally make the anxiety go away. And as a result, they made it worse. Their increased focus and attempts to do something about anxiety just made them more anxious about it. But then what shifted wasn't so much their activity as their attitude. It wasn't their approach they changed so much as their understanding. Because once we understand what anxiety is, what it truly is, we usually stop talking about managing it. The answer to the question, how did you finally beat anxiety, isn't I finally found the perfect anxiety management strategy. It's something much simpler. It's I stopped caring whether or not I was anxious. That doesn't mean they became reckless or dismissive of their well-being, and it doesn't mean anxiety never appeared again. They didn't stop being human. It means they returned anxiety to the same category as joy, frustration, sadness, or excitement, an emotion, a reaction to life, a feeling that doesn't require a recovery program every time it appears. I often hear people express their desire to get better, but I think the phrase get better can accidentally keep people stuck, because every time you ask, am I getting better, you're also reminding yourself that you currently believe you are unwell. Every good day becomes evidence that you might be recovering. Every difficult day becomes evidence that the illness is still there, and your entire life becomes an ongoing assessment of your condition. But what happens when you stop seeing anxiety as a condition? What happens when the question is no longer, how do I heal, but how do I feel? That doesn't instantly make every sensation comfortable. It doesn't erase every frightening thought, but potentially it changes what those experiences mean. Because what we keep referring to as recovery isn't really that at all. It's more about discovery, the discovery that anxiety is not an illness you need to recover from. So when a client comes to see me to get better, one of the big things I know they will at some point understand is that they weren't actually here to learn how to heal an anxious mind. They were here to discover that their mind was never ill. If the ideas discussed in this video are resonating with you and you'd like my personal guidance to help you get the other side of anxiety, then follow the link in the comments to book a free, no obligation consultation. And if you found this video helpful, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel for weekly videos on anxiety and understanding how the mind works. But that's it for this one. I'm Tim Box. Always remember, be kind to your mind, and I'll see you next time.